We have two tropical storms spinning in the Atlantic basin this evening. Hello, I'm Mike Naso from the IPR 365 YouTube page with the latest on the tropics. We have two tropical storms, Dorian in the northeastern Caribbean, which is going to be a problem down the road it looks like for the Bahamas and the southeastern U.S., and Tropical Storm Erin, which has just been christened to the west of Bermuda, and that is expected to remain out at sea, although it could cause some problems perhaps. Canadian Maritimes up here want to keep an eye on it, as well as some high surf along the east coast. But let's get to Dorian, since that is the feature that we are most concerned about right now in the Atlantic. Here he is as of 11 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, which is also Eastern Time. Dorian was at 16 north, 63 west, and it was right around 50 miles per hour, so it's not a strong tropical storm by any stretch of the imagination. However, it is expected to strengthen a little bit over the next 24 hours. It's been moving northwest at about 11 or 12 miles an hour, which is different than the last 2 days when it was moving west or west-northwest. It now is definitely feeling a weakness to the north in the high pressure, the Bermuda High, and that should drag it near or over Puerto Rico over the next 24 to 36 hours, and we now have a hurricane watch in effect for Puerto Rico. We also have tropical storm warnings for Puerto Rico, Vieques, Culebra, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, as well as the Dominican Republic. And we have a tropical storm watch for the Dominican Republic as well, because the system will close in on these areas by the time Thursday afternoon rolls around. After that, it's a little uncertain. It is expected to continue northwest for a while, maybe slow down a bit, and then as the high pressure, that Bermuda High to the north of it, that clockwise flow builds in, Dorian should get pushed back west in the general direction of Florida. And it is expected to be a hurricane by the time it's bearing down on the Bahamas and Florida by, say, Saturday and Sunday. And it could be a pretty potent hurricane. So we're going to want to keep an eye on this, because I'll show you these model runs in a bit, but they're a little unnerving to say the least if you live along the Florida coastline. There's Dorian and this beautiful satellite imagery. It's a very compact system, and those can spin up or down very quickly. The good news is it doesn't really have a well-defined core. It's definitely had to deal with dry air ever since it was out off Africa and the central Atlantic, and the wind shear is still a little bit of a hindrance. However, if this can avoid major land masses, maybe just scrape Puerto Rico, remain over water as much as it can, it will likely make it north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola into the Turks, Caicos, and the Bahamas, and it should have a much better environment for strengthening, and that is the big concern at this hour. You can see on that infrared imagery, I'm not seeing any real signs of strengthening, although it is bursting right now. It's been bursting, then kind of waning, waxing, waning, waxing, waning, but that's allowed it to persist as a moderate tropical storm the last couple of days. Although it does have these clouds that are fanning out here, you can still see some shear from Erin off to the north, and it is definitely not able to consolidate into a tight, well-organized circulation, but it might do so. And that's why we're going to keep such a close eye on it over the next couple of days. Puerto Rico, you're in the crosshairs here. Okay, there's the San Juan radar, the long range. Look at the rotation here around Dorian, and that is headed in the general direction of areas of San Juan, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and you guys are going to have heavy rainfall, to say the least. Not to mention the potential that Dorian could become a hurricane by the time it comes through some of these islands here. So if you're in Puerto Rico, obviously 2 years ago you got hit by a catastrophic Hurricane Maria. This is likely not to be anywhere in the same ballpark as Maria, but nevertheless, it could be a hurricane. And I know there are a lot of people still recovering there, so it is something you'll want to be ready for. This was the model guidance 48 hours ago. You can see that it was all over the place. Some of the models took the system up towards the Carolinas, others kept it going into the Caribbean Sea. Well, as you can see, we have had a lot more model runs, and we now have a pretty good consensus that this system's going to move over or near Puerto Rico, near the Turks and Caicos, and then back towards the west or the west-northwest. And there are a lot of computer models over Florida and Georgia and the southeastern U.S. by the time, say, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday rolls around, Labor Day, we could be dealing with a hurricane headed to Florida, and it could be a strong hurricane. I'm not going to mince words here. There's no reason to think it won't strengthen if it makes it out over the Bahamas. This is the GFS model. This was the 18Z. Look what it does with Dorian. Here comes Dorian right into the Georgia coastline as a strengthening hurricane. Look at that. Did you see that? It gets its act together over the Bahamas, comes right in. Now that's from weathernerds.com, appropriately named. Now this is the Canadian model, and you can see it brings Dorian into Florida and then kind of brings it back north over Georgia. Here he comes right there, strengthening, boom, right into the central areas of the east coast of Florida, the center of the east coast, and areas like Jupiter, Melbourne, you would no doubt be impacted. You can see it also starts to spin a system up in the Gulf of Mexico after Dorian departs in a couple of days' time. The most disturbing model is the H-Wurf model, which brings it near Puerto Rico over the Bahamas, and look at that, a monster Category 4 hurricane off the tip of Cape Canaveral, and that would be sometime around early next week. Hopefully this doesn't pan out. It's just a computer model, but that would be a very, very serious scenario for Florida. Now, right now, the system's expected to become a Category 1 hurricane. It is way too far out to predict anything like this, but it is one of our computer models that they use, and it is showing a terrific strengthening over the Bahamas into a very powerful hurricane, which is why everyone needs to keep an eye on Dorian, whether you live in Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, to say nothing of the Turks, Caicos, Bahamas, and Puerto Rico. Water temperature is not a problem for it. It's hurricane season. It's late August, very warm waters. They do get even warmer here in the Bahamas off the southeast coast, and that is one reason why the system strengthens. Also, hurricanes tend to intensify when they're being pushed west under the high pressure ridge. So if Dorian is going to pull up here and bend back to the west, not only will it have the warm waters, it will likely have very nice upper level conditions. As of right now, it looks like. You can see it's still dealing with some shear today off towards the southwest to northeast right in front of it, but once it breaks through, it should have a safe harbor here for intensification, and that is what the official forecast from the Hurricane Center shows. I did want to note we have another tropical storm up here. Moving on out to sea, it was a tropical depression the last 24 hours, and that, my friends, is Tropical Storm Erin. Here's the latest on Tropical Storm Erin as of 11 p.m. It was at 31.9 north, 72.1 west, winds 40 miles per hour. It just got a name, Erin, and it's moving west at 2, very slowly here, but it should start to accelerate north and then northeast and eventually weaken, not become a hurricane. And it could impact areas of Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, the Canadian Maritimes. This whole area up here needs to be on the lookout. 1,005 millibars, funny enough, Dorian is 1,006 millibars. So right now, Erin is actually stronger than our Dorian, even though Dorian is the much greater threat for land areas right now. There's an infrared satellite imagery of Tropical Storm Erin. You can see the spinning right in here. See this spinning here, that turning? That is the circulation, and it's clearly in an unfavorable environment, but this blob blowing up over the top of it is enough to give it some push in wind speed up to a tropical storm. Now these models with Tropical Storm Dorian are the reason we're watching it so carefully. These are the European ensembles. I want to make sure I showed these. Now these were as of the 12Z. We're going to be getting new model runs in about 2 or 3 hours. By the time you see this update, it'll be close to midnight on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. By 2 in the morning, we get another fresh run of these models to see what happens. But you can see if you live anywhere, according to this, from Fort Lauderdale all the way up to Savannah in particular, you need to be overlooking your plans. Is no reason to panic yet. Obviously, it's still just a tropical storm in the Caribbean. However, it is definitely prudent that you start to think about where you might want to go and how to get your plans of action in place in case Dorian comes your way. In the final analysis, the key message from the Hurricane Center: tropical storm conditions expected in the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico tomorrow, and possible in the Dominican on Wednesday night and Thursday. Hurricane conditions are possible tomorrow night in Puerto Rico. Heavy rainfall and flash flooding the next couple of days, and that's expected to occur over the Bahamas into next week. And the threat of tropical storm or hurricane conditions, along with surge, are increasing for areas of the Bahamas as well as the Florida East Coast. So residents in these areas should monitor the progress of Dorian and ensure that they have their hurricane plan in place. And, this is very important, uncertainty in the intensity forecast later this week remains higher than usual due to a large spread in the model guidance. Okay? And then it says storm. I don't know what that means, but this is a tropical storm. It is expected to become a hurricane. Right now it's uncertain. If you live in Florida, the Bahamas, Turks Caicos, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, be on the alert. That's it right now for Dorian, and I will talk to you guys next time as the tropics are getting active for hurricane season 2019.